So we're group 1 and we're going to do a screencast on chapter 8, and Sydney and G is also in that group, but they'll be featuring in chapter 9 screencast, sorry. And this is Rebecca will be talking, and right now I'm talking, and Dennis is also in the screencast. And as we'll do it, we'll tell you which one is which.
Okay, so the Articles of Confederation was ultimately a failure. There were a lot of problems with the Articles. It had, for one thing, had no national bank, which meant they couldn't make currency, they couldn't pay for whatever they needed to get paid for. Congress could not collect taxes or levy taxes to raise money. They had to borrow from the state governments, and often state governments, they had no interest in paying for what needs to be paid. It had only one house, so it was just the Congress. There was no executive branch, no president to lead the government. There was no judicial branch, no Supreme Court to determine, I guess, the constitutionality of the decisions. And Congress could not regulate foreign trade, they could not enforce law, they had no power to enforce law. It was really hard. So the Annapolis Convention took place in Annapolis, Maryland, and it was held so that the delegates can decide what to do with the problems of the Articles. So eventually they realized there are only four states sent delegates to this convention. So when they realized they needed full representation. So Hamilton ended the Annapolis Convention and decided they would be holding another convention in Philadelphia. So it's called the Constitutional Convention or the Philadelphia Convention. And in here they discussed, they were supposed to discuss how to revise the Articles, but instead they ended up completely changing the government altogether, creating the Constitution. So several controversies arose while discussing how to revise the Articles. One of them was in terms of representation. So how would these states be represented? There was the New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan, which in the Virginia plan was first held so that it based its representation in Congress based on the population. It was supported by the larger states because the larger states had more population, and therefore they would have more representation if the Virginia plan was passed. In response to that, the New Jersey plan was it was proposed. This one had only one house, it was unicameral, and it gave one vote to every state, so it was equal representation. It was supported by the smaller states who did not want to lose power in the government. So eventually, so they were many months. They were fighting over how Congress would be represented, and eventually the Great Compromise was reached. So in the Great Compromise, there are two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. So in the Senate, the upper house, it gave 2 votes to every state, equal representation, which pleased the smaller states, while in the House of Representatives, it was proportional to population, so it pleased the larger states. Including in the Great Compromise was the 3/5 compromise. So one of the issues the southern states had was they wanted their slaves to be counted part of the population so that they would have even more representation. But at the same time, they also didn't want their slaves to be taxed, because even though they considered them as property, they didn't want to pay for their property. So, and the opposite side, the northern states, they didn't want slaves to be included in the southern population, but they wanted slaves to be taxed. So, in the end, a compromise was reached once again. So, every 3/5, so 3 out of 5 black people in the South was counted in the southern population. So the southern states have more representation in the House of Representatives. But in return, the slaves were to be taxed. They were property, so they were taxed. So it pleased the northern states, so that they knew the southern states would have to like deal with it first. So after all this was like made and stuff, they planned this all out. Obviously, there's some controversy. So there were the Federalists who supported it and the Anti-Federalists who did not support it. Okay, the Federalists' main leaders was Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, George Washington, and they supported it. They believed that a strong central government was needed to maintain order and preserve the Union. They needed a strong central government to enforce these laws. So, and the Anti-Federalists, they didn't want to lose power from the states. They wanted to keep the state powers. So, and they believed that a strong central government would destroy like what they had fought for in the American Revolution. They had fought from a tyrannical central government, and now they're afraid another one might rise from the Constitution. They were afraid it would restrict states' rights. So one of them. In order for the Federalists, the main writers of the Federalist Papers, which were a collection of 85 essays that explained what the powers of the Constitution would consist of and why it would be beneficial. The main writers included James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. It helped explain to the people who did not understand what was going on at the time. It helped explain what everything was and why everything was happening. Two of the most famous papers included Federalist Paper number 10 and number 51. In the Federalist Paper number 10, it mentions how like political factions were necessary because the more, instead of one equal republic, like having just one opinion, having a bunch of different opinions like fighting against each other, it prevents from one majority from having more power than the other. And in Federalist Paper 51, it explains how there's a separation of powers. There's like checks and balances, basically. So to prevent tyranny, there's the three branches: the judicial, executive, and the legislature. And each one would prevent one from becoming more powerful than the other. So.
Okay, so the president, its duties in government is that he can conduct foreign affairs and negotiate treaties and appoint diplomatic and judicial officers and also veto congressional legislation. So, like one example is how George Washington, he believed that it was his job to administer the laws and not to make them. He also barely made any legislative proposals to Congress. So delegates also wanted to insulate the executive from an uninformed public and the intrigues of the legislature. This basically means that they wanted to protect the president from the whims of mob rule and Congress. He rejected popular election by Congress and adopted the Electoral College. The Electoral College basically just helped elect the president and vice president by electing from each state and not the popular vote. Alright, so the three branches of government is the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. And basically the executive branch, which was the president's role, he carried out and enforced laws made by the legislative branch. The judicial branch interpreted or explained the laws created by the legislative branch. This was the Supreme Court, and then the legislative branch created the law, and this was like the president, vice president. It was Congress. And then this was a very important contribution from Madison because it dispelled the fears that there was too much power given to a small amount of leaders. Alright, so the Bill of Rights was written by James Madison, which included the 10 amendments to the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists unanimously supported this because they felt that this would add protection against the tyranny of the federal government. The Federalists believed that it was unnecessary because this was already implied that in the Constitution, and also it was also in the people's rights. It was basically like the outline of people's rights. The Bill of Rights could like it basically ensured freedom of worship. It gave like the right of free speech, gave citizens to bear arms, and forbade the quartering of troops in private homes, and it also gave secured citizens like a trial by jury. Yeah. Okay, so the Hamilton's financial program was this was his this was Hamilton tried to turn the United States into a manufacturing power. So he started this program to keep U.S. finances under control. So he proposed that the federal government take over all debts of the individual states. He also proposed that the chartering of a national bank that promised loans to industries. Jefferson and Madison both opposed these plans and said that the elite will benefit from this program rather than farmers. So Hamilton's economic vision provided a system of public credit and a steady stream of government revenue through tariffs.
So the Whiskey Rebellion. So as you guys all know, there was a Whiskey Rebellion, and it was basically a farmer. So the farmers refused to pay federal taxes on whiskey, and it was a major challenge to viability of the U.S. government or the Constitution. So apparently the farmers they went through rebellion again because they wanted to defend their liberties by attacking the revenue collectors. And this was significant because it was the first time that the Congress did something. President Washington sent 15,000 state militiamen under Alexander Hamilton to seize them. And luckily there were no bloodshed and nobody was really killed. And there were different reactions to this rebellion. The Easterns said that the government did the right thing, they actually took charge of it. Because in Shays' rebellion they didn't take charge and they thought there was a complete mess. However, the Westerns criticized as an unwarranted use of force against the common people. Now the foreign affairs, this is a very important one. So there was neutrality proclamation of neutrality, French Revolution, Citizen of Genet, the Jay Treaty, the Pinckney Treaty. So basically I'm going to go over Citizen of Genet first, and Citizen of Genet was basically about Edmond Genet, who was a French minister to U.S. and he objected the Washington policy. He broke all the normal rules of diplomacy by appealing directly to American people to support the French cause. And it was so outrageous that Jefferson approved of Washington's request to the French government that they revoked the affecting diplomat. And he had to do this because if he didn't do this, then and if we went to French, they could have got killed. So Washington was like, oh, we'll give you citizenship, so he became a citizen of the United States. And another foreign affairs will be the Jay Treaty. So Washington sent John Jay to French to talk out of its offensive practice of searching and seizing American ships and imprisoning seamen. Sorry. In the Jay Treaty, it didn't say anything about British seizures of American merchant ships. However, it stated that it would maintain Washington's policy on neutrality, which kept the U.S. at peace. And also, there's another foreign affairs which is called Pinckney Treaty. So basically, it's about Thomas Pinckney, he was a U.S. minister to Spain, and he negotiated a treaty in which Spain agreed to open the lower Mississippi River and New Orleans to American trade. Now, this is important because it can boost up the market, because you know how during the 1700s, like 1700s to early 1800s, they had it was a very busy trading market. So this would definitely boost up the market. And another one is proclamation of neutrality, and basically it's very simple. It's basically President Washington believed the young nation was not strong enough. So what he did was he wanted to stay neutral and he didn't want to get into European affairs. And he didn't want to get into European